Howdy, howdy. I'm so glad that you have stumbled across my little corner of the internet. This week I'm doing a fun little reading challenge that was inspired by Haley Pham. I'm sure other people have done it, but she's just the other booktuber I follow who has done this style of video before, and that is reading books based off of the book cover color. I used a random color generator, ended up with green, and tried to find all of my fiction books that were some shade of green. I did have to take a little bit of liberties because some of these might be a little bit more blue than green, but it was hard when I was trying to find colors to actually find books that I had in that. I feel like the color of my books is a little all over the place, and to get a lot, I'm gonna have to do like a weird color like tan or brown or something super ugly, because I don't have a lot of beautiful, colorful book covers. I was also trying to focus on books that I haven't read yet, which ended up being a challenge as well. I did find 5 books in some shade of green that I'm going to attempt to read over the next week to 2 weeks. The first book is O Pioneers by Willa Cather. Cather is an author that I have wanted to read for a long time. She is extremely well known for her novel My Antonia. She is an American author who wrote in the early 1900s and is considered one of the classic American authors of that time period. So I want to give this one a go. I know nothing about her stories, so I'm kind of excited to dive into this and see what it's about. I then have a Gail Forman novel called If I Stay, which I believe is technically a YA fiction. I think this might be book 1 in a series. We'll find out. Next up, I have a book of poetry. This is by Sarah Kay. She is one of my partner's most favorite spoken word poets. So I think he's actually read this poem to me specifically before. He has a couple of her books because he just loves her writing style and her poetry. So this should be a fun little read. I think it'll take me all of 10 minutes, but it's kind of fun. Poetry is not always my thing, but I do like a good spoken word, and I have watched some of her performances on YouTube, and she's fantastically gifted. So I'm excited to delve into the type. I have another first book of a series. This is called The Dragonbone Chair. It is a Tad Williams series. I have mixed feelings about digging into this because I have tried to read some other Tad Williams. For some reason or another, was always uninterested in continuing the series. Another book, which is my partner's contribution to our library because he very much loves this type of fantasy, like I think you would probably consider it more high fantasy, is his vibe. So we'll see how this one goes and if I end up continuing this series. The last book I have started reading already, and that is The Girl I Used to Be. This is a thriller, psychological thriller about a woman who lives in a small town in England who is kind of questioning her memories of things in her life. I'm 78 pages in. I'm realizing the more I branch out in my genres, there are particular characterizations and plot points that I don't enjoy as much. One of them being alcohol consumption, particularly excessive alcohol consumption, as a means to drive a plot in a certain direction. And this book falls into that, where she had a problem with drinking and blacking out in her, high school and college days. She's since given it up as an adult, but she's not completely sober. And so she ends up going to this work event, getting super drunk, has an interaction with a potential client, but can't remember any of it, which is unusual for her. She starts lying to people in her life and starts having doubts and questions about what's really going on. Somebody appears to maybe be stalking her. It's an interesting story, except that it relies on her inability to hold her own with alcohol to drive that plot forward, which to me just feels very contrived. Like, I do get it, it's just not my thing. So we'll see how this book goes. I am interested enough to continue reading it, but I'm not 100% sold on what's going on and what's going to happen in it. I have finished The Girl I Used to Be. Overall, I think I would give this book a 3.5 stars. It is written in 2 parts, and part 1 I did not enjoy as much, and then we get a big reveal at the end of part 1 that when I started part 2, I was so much more invested in the story, and the action picks up significantly in part 2. We get a new character POV, and so it just gets a lot more interesting, and some of the issues I had in part 1 definitely don't appear as like plot points to drive the story forward in part 2, which is also why I think I enjoyed the second half of the book a little bit better. Some of the issues I had with part 1 is The Girl I Used to Be definitely falls into this category of fiction in which the story works because there's this social expectation that women shouldn't be believed about their own personal experiences, particularly when those experiences involve something that might impact someone else's life. This story revolves around a grape that happened of our main character, Gemma. In the prologue, we find her 15 years ago. She's just graduated high school. She's going to a huge party that a boy named Alex is throwing for his entire class. She doesn't know Alex personally, but everyone from the school and in her graduating class has been invited, and so of course she's showing up. She's going along with her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend, ends up getting super wasted, finds herself alone upstairs in Alex's bedroom and passes out. And we as the reader are left from that prologue kind of having this feeling that something happened. It's not like surprising to put 2 and 2 together. I pretty much knew right away after the prologue that grape was more than likely what was going to have occurred to Gemma. We fast forward into Gemma's life now. She is in her early 30s. She has a husband, a 3-year-old son, and her own real estate agency that she's running. Ends up having an experience with a potential client, runs into him again at a training. She does not drink very much at all at this point, but ends up getting super drunk this night, going back to her hotel room where David follows her and kisses her, and then from then on she can't remember anything that happens. She doesn't think that anything untoward occurred after David kissed her, but she cannot remember anything from that night at all. Then proceeds her like slowly having the psychological breakdown and not being able to trust her own reality and her own experiences, and therefore being unable to tell anybody else in her life about what might have happened. Presumably David ends up kind of stalking her. Something incriminating might have happened to her. She starts getting videos and photos from that night at the hotel, all where David doesn't appear, but David obviously is the one who's sending them to her because they're all from his POV. Gemma gets a video in which she says some really nasty things about her husband and the fact that she's jealous that he gets to stay at home with their kid and she has to do all the work. There are some photos from her in the hotel room and some pretty compromising situations. Again, Gemma cannot remember anything that happened to her, and so she doesn't want to believe that any of this occurred, but at the same time, it is evidence that something did happen, and the last thing she wants is for any of this to get out. She's trying to figure out who David is. None of the information he gave her agency is real, at least real in the sense that it's associated with him. His name itself is presumably fake. At the end of part 1, like I said, we get this big reveal in which we figure out that David is in some sort of relationship with one of Gemma's employees named Rachel, who has been a side character up until this point. And so that's when we get into part 2, and now we have 2 POVs because we get Gemma and now we get Rachel. These character POVs are not written in such a way that they are necessarily distinguishable from each other. So we just get like the chapter number and then we get the character's perspective that we're going to be in, because honestly, you wouldn't be able to tell which woman is which. My understanding of why we're getting both POVs is because at this point, the story becomes a partnership between Gemma and Rachel. We learn that Rachel was complicit. She's married to David, whose name does end up being David. His last name is just different. She married David and initially had this plan of trying to get revenge on Gemma because Alex was her brother, and when Gemma came out and accused Alex of raping her, Alex's life fell apart. He ended up committing self-slaughter, and therefore Rachel's life fell apart. Her parents divorced. Her mom became an alcoholic and died of cancer when Rachel was in college, and Rachel had to spend all of her time caretaking. Alex was her mother's favorite child, and so her mother is extremely abusive in some respects to Rachel. And Rachel wants to get back at Gemma because she thinks that there's no way Alex could have ever done it, and so everything in her life and how it fell apart is Gemma's fault because Gemma told a lie. And we learn that kind of in the beginning of part 2 when Gemma finds out that David and Rachel are together. And then we start getting Rachel's perspective to learn all of this backstory because it becomes important to build up sympathy for Rachel because we find out that David is more of a pervert. He's abusive towards Rachel, and the more we go, the more we find out that like he took their plan for revenge against Gemma more to the extreme. All of these videos and pictures he took were not supposed to happen according to Rachel, and we start suspecting that David might be more deeply involved in what's going on than initially thought by either woman, or really by Rachel. I don't want to spoil the ending. There's a bit of like, the reveal is predictable by the end, but that doesn't make it any less satisfactory. And I did love to see the relationship that grows between Rachel and Gemma. It's a little hard because it feels so rooted in their shared trauma, and relationships like that can be very rocky. Like they can have their own difficulties and keep people stuck in reliving that trauma together, because that becomes your only bond between the two of you, and it can be very deep and feel extremely real, and that you have, one other person who understands you, and so you like latch on to that relationship and can't move on from it. Obviously this is just a book, and we end our story once everything is revealed and we get this little bit of like, this little sense of justice has been accomplished. We don't get anything after that, so the relationship works in the context of the book. I think some of the themes around family and what it means to have a home and where's your home and who is your home, I thought those were all pretty interesting. The book is also set in Ireland and the UK, and I always like books that do have a different setting than my own country. Overall, if you like a slow burn psychological thriller, this book may be more for you than it was for me. If you're okay with sticking with that until action picks up and it becomes more of like unraveling a mystery, which was my reading experience, you might also enjoy this book. The next book I'm going to pick up for my green week is Oh Pioneers. I have the day off today, and I think given the length of this book, I might be able to finish it, check in with you, and let you know which one I am reading next.
French dip. Study, conservatory, kitchen, and hall, maybe? Like parts of a building or something? Rooms and clue. That makes sense. And then Oliver Twist.
I am almost done with Oh Pioneers. I thought I would be faster at reading this book, but I have this habit of when I start getting distracted, I'll kind of like skim the next few chapters of the book. Generally speaking, it's not a good habit because I'll spoil stuff for myself and then I have to like stop and continue reading where I left off and actually go through each page of the book. I made the mistake of doing that towards the end of this book as I was just kind of counting how many pages I had left. Up until this point, it's been a very, I'm not going to say a cute story because this book isn't cute, but it's been a very straightforward story, I guess is how I would describe it, of this immigrant family that moved from Sweden to the United States and then out to the wild west of Nevada, and the family's journey as that generation of children grows up and each of their experiences depending on where they were kind of at in their economic status and whether they were focused on surviving day to day or if they had more prosperity, and could do things like become educated and live this American dream, right? Like the progression of everyone's experience in achieving the classic American dream. Anyway, the story itself was kind of just going along, humdrum, not in like a boring way, but just normal life, essentially. And then when I got distracted and started skimming ahead, I spoiled all of these major plot points for myself of like, and I almost don't want to read the rest of the book now because of what happens, and it's gonna get really sad and go really downhill from here, and I just don't want that. Like, I kind of liked living in this not like idyllic paradise. Like, it was just a sweet story about a family living in the Wild West and how the West was developed, and like a character study, I guess, is how I would describe it up to that point, and now it's gonna get sad. But I have to read it, and I'm going to read it and finish it today, and then I'm probably going to pick up The Type next and just read this. And then I'm debating whether I want to start this fantasy novel and get as far as I can over the next week, or if I want to aim to finish another book this week and pick up this novel by Gail Forman instead. I'm half tempted to do this one first and then just commit to reading this series, which I hope it's only a trilogy, because otherwise if I say I'm going to commit to this and then it ends up being like an 8 or 10 book series, that could be the entire rest of the year of reading for me. I hope it's not, but this book is not clear on how many books are in the series. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna finish out Pioneers. I'm gonna finish the type. What I might do is go ahead and read a chapter in If I Stay, and then read a chapter in the Dragonbone chair, and just kind of see which one's speaking to me more. And depending on that, make my decision of what I'm going to continue with. I don't know if anybody else has this urge to wear a hoodie during the hottest point in summer, but I did today, and so I'm a little overly warm, but I'm cozy, and that's what matters. I was very silly. I realized I picked out If I Stay as one of my options. I opened this yesterday to do my plan of reading the first chapter and then deciding if I wanted to stick with this one or start the Dragonbone chair. I read this book already. It's probably been about a year since I read it, and I clearly didn't put the story together with the title when I picked this out, and the back doesn't give you enough information that I put two and two together. But as soon as I opened the book and started reading the prologue, it all came flooding back. I remember enjoying this book. It is definitely an extremely sad story. There's a devastating car accident that happens at the beginning, and our main character essentially spends the entire story in a coma. So it's not for the faint of heart. If you're okay with a book that's going to make you sob at the end, then I would definitely recommend If I Stay. I think probably just based on the fact that I didn't remember it, it's probably a 4-star. I'd have to go back and actually look at what I put on Goodreads, if anything, for this book. Long story short, I'm not going to read it this time because I already have. And so instead, I did go ahead and start the Dragonbone chair. I am on chapter 6 at this point of a 700-page book? Yeah, of a 700-page book. I did check, this is only a trilogy. There are technically other novels in the series that are like the middle books, if you will. I don't intend to read those. I may, depending on how this goes, go ahead and pick up the trilogy. I think we have it all on our shelf. If not, I'll look and see what the library has, and I'm sure they've got, in this series, they have a ton of Tad Williams. So we'll see how this goes. It is very classic fantasy of like, in the sense that even though it is its own world, it feels like medieval Europe. And I have very mixed feelings about this concept of fantasy being generally set in worlds that feel very westernized, if you will, and very Dark Ages, Middle Ages Europe. And that's not always the feeling I get because of the world themselves. Sometimes it's just because that's the stage of development that these societies are at. Like, they tend to have a lot of monarchy associated with the government system. Societies are very agrarian, and so in my head, that's why I just go to Middle Ages Europe, medieval Europe, because it's very typical, like what I think life was like for those people. I don't have a ton to report so far. We've met our main character, Simon, who is an orphan. His mother died in childbirth. His father died prior to his birth. And at this point, I'm still just in the world building stage. I know that there's a doctor who reminds me of our Merlin character, and I think, and honestly, I get a lot of King Arthur vibes from this story. So we'll see. I'm not sold on it. But again, I'm not even 100 pages in. And this is just the slow part of a fantasy read anyway, as you're learning the history of everything and getting introduced to characters. So I'm going to stick with it. I probably am not going to prolong this video to the point I finish it. So what I'll probably do is go ahead and read as much as I can throughout the end of this week. It is the morning of Thursday right now, so I'll like read through tomorrow and Saturday, Sunday, and like check in Sunday evening and close out this video with where I'm at this book. I am going to go ahead and read my final green book for this week, which is The Type. I don't think I can read this live, at least the whole thing live for copyright, but I thought it would be fun to go ahead and read just the first few pages. It's basically only a couple lines per page, and then there's these little illustrations on each one of them. I'm going to try to read to you, but forgive me because poetry is not my strong suit. So this is 100% going to sound extremely different from if you saw Sarah Kay give a performance of it. If you grow up the type of woman men want to look at, you can let them look at you. Do not mistake eyes for hands or windows or mirrors. Let them see what a woman looks like. They may not have ever seen one before. If you grow up the type of woman men want to touch, you can let them touch you. Sometimes it is not you they are reaching for. Sometimes it is a bottle, a door, a sandwich, a Pulitzer, another woman. But their hands found you first. I'm gonna have to see if I can find a performance from her of this, because I bet you it's just absolutely gut-wrenching to see her say it live. And if I find one, I'll link it below in the description. But that was really short but really profound, and I'm kind of sad now. The books about women's place in society, just they're always a little depressing, you know? Anyway, there's that. I'm going to keep reading The Dragonbone Chair. I'm going to see you on Sunday. Until then, happy reading. I've been informed that The Dragonbone Chair is one of those books and series in which you have to read the first 60% before you're hooked. I am going to trudge my way through it over the next week. For now, I'm going to end this video. I appreciate you guys following along on all of my little series and book reviews. I'm always open to book recommendations or challenge recommendations or just general video ideas in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.